Iris Pavmi friend and former senior classmate Brian Eldridge was standing there in a tuxedo. His salt and pepper hair, which was usually a sort of disheveled halo around his head, had been neatly combed, and his typically paint-smeared hands were clean and with shiny, recently manicured nails. "Brian?" I asked. He smiled at me and then looked beyond me to the hotel employee. "She's with me," he said with authority. I was surprised again. Brian was an alpha? People at the university assumed Brian was a beta, and he didn't correct them. But then he might have faced some pushback on that. Alphas rarely went into the arts. It wasn't powerful enough for them. He held out his arm for me now, which I took. "You look lovely tonight, Iris," he said. "You clean up nicely yourself," I said back with a smile as he led me inside the room, which was lavishly decorated and absolutely teeming with partygoers. Selena had been right. Many were obviously not alphas. "What brings you to this boring all-alpha shindig, my dear?" Brian asked. "My fated mate is here," I said firmly. Selena might marry him, but I had been chosen for him. I still had that. "Who is that?" he asked in pleased surprise. "Arthur Davin." Brian stopped in his tracks and looked at me with a complex mix of emotions. "Presidential candidate Arthur Davin?" "The same." I gathered myself, waiting for him to laugh or look at me with pity. He did neither, saying, "I see." I waited as people near us danced and drank and traded favors. "The party tonight is in celebration of Arthur's candidacy as well as to announce his engagement to Selena Wilford," Brian said, and I wondered if my shattered life were showing on my face. This time I was the one who said, "I see." He was obviously picking his words with care. "It's well known in the Alpha Circle that Arthur and Selena have been engaged since they were 15. I nodded and somehow kept my expression pleasant. 15. That means this isn't because of his presidential run or his corporate plans. Then came an even worse thought. Arthur was engaged when we met. All the alphas knew, but I was never important enough to tell. No wonder he had been so resistant to our relationship when we first met. He must have been so disappointed I was human. He had probably thought he was doing me a favor making me his bed warmer. Brian looked away from me, and I saw Selena step up on the little stand where the small band had been playing. The music stopped and she smiled out over the crowd. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," she said, her powerful alpha voice easily reaching out to the crowd. "As so many of you know, Arthur and I are here not just to thank you for endorsing his candidacy for Alpha President, but also to join us in celebrating our official announcement for our formal engagement celebration, which will happen next month on, of course, the full moon." There was wild applause and hearty congratulations all round. I watched as a smiling Arthur stood with Selena, champagne in hand. Confetti fell and the crowd cheered. I had never seen Arthur look so happy. I couldn't believe no later than this morning I had thought our child would bring Arthur and me together in marriage. He had never intended to be with me. I felt a stabbing pain in my heart followed by another in my stomach. I felt a wave of dizziness pass through me, and I remembered I had eaten nothing since breakfast that morning. But the pain in my stomach intensified, and I was unable to stop the blackness that filled my eyes. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. My bed was in a private room I saw right away, and there was a large window to my right through which I could see dawn breaking. On my left was a figure it took me a minute to recognize, wanting it so desperately to be Arthur. But it was Brian who sat there, still in his tuxedo. His kind eyes watched me struggle fully awake. "What happened?" I asked. "You fainted, my dear girl," he said gently. My face flooded with heat. "In front of everyone?" He shook his head. "You were very graceful, and a caterer helped me get you out of the room. Considering all the celebrating, I don't think anyone really noticed." "Well, I have that," I said faintly. Brian looked at me in concern. "I had to say I was family to stay with you, and the doctor told me about your pregnancy. She also said you were dehydrated." He nodded to the four hooked up to my arm. "I see," I said. "I was saying that a lot." I shook it off. "Thank you so much for your help. I confess, I was more than a little concerned when you said Arthur is your fated mate. Did you really not know about Selena?" I shook my head. "So," he sighed, "you're unmated, pregnant, and if you're like me, awash in student loans." I nodded and felt my stomach churn with anxiety. Tears were forming in my eyes and everything just seemed so bleak, even hopeless. The silence was getting unbearable when Brian spoke. I think you should leave Arthur. I stared at him in shock. I know your plans after graduation were to hold your first off-campus exhibition, he said next. I told you I would help with that, and I meant it. I don't understand, I said, starting now to feel numb. You've changed your mind? Was I not worth his trouble now? He looked surprised. No, I still mean it. Well, are you thinking you'll be keeping the child? I straightened my spine. Absolutely. He nodded, looking more serious than I was used to from him. I guessed as much. Surely, though, you realize that with the scrutiny on Arthur now, your status as his fated mate even as he marries an alpha will probably get out. Yes. He was right to look serious. I wiped at my left eye as a teardrop welled out. So let me help you properly, he said. Yours is a rare and priceless talent, and Orden is a great country in many ways, but its insistence on keeping obsolete traditions even as politicians give lip service to wolf-human equality. Was there some hope in all this after all? What are you thinking? I asked. I'm one of 4 children, he said, so the family business hardly rests on my shoulders. Boericon is a smaller, less wealthy country than Orden, but it's a wonderful place to live and has an amazing art culture. I'm moving there to join an art incubator program. He smiled, warming to his topic. Each month, artists receive a modest but quite livable stipend to support their work with the goal of a major exhibition in 2 years. And they welcome humans in all wolf classes without prejudice. Sounds wonderful, I said honestly. You, my dear, would shine there. I know it. Me. Yes. He nodded and took my hand. I'm leaving tomorrow. I went to the party last night in great part to say goodbye to some friends. I'm turning it into a road trip, seeing the sights, and it will take about 3 weeks. He smiled. Come with me. Me? I asked dumbly. Yes. I tried to take in what he was saying. Just go. I asked. Tomorrow. The mere idea of leaving Arthur created a physical pain in my chest, and now I was crying in earnest. Brain held on to my hands and murmured, It will be all right. But I have nothing planned or sorted, and my paintings are still at the school. Lying there looking at my friend, I couldn't think of a better plan, but I also didn't want to burden Brian with my troubles. Brian smiled at me with open compassion. If money is an issue, I have some I can lend you. You'll pay it back with no trouble once you start showing your work. And I can get your paintings professionally packed with mine and delivered to us. He shook his head. But you can't stay with an alpha like this just because you haven't planned for this and you loved him. Growing up as an alpha, I've seen a lot. You will definitely regret it if you chose to stay now, and soon. Thank you, I whispered, well aware my face was wet and swollen from crying. Yes, please, and thank you so much. I had actually already been invited to the program by the Boericon Art Foundation a few months ago, but I had turned it down, not wanting to be away from Arthur. Lying there looking at my friend, I felt I didn't want to burden Brian with my troubles, but I also couldn't think of a better plan. He looked happy, and even better, he looked proud. The dawn turned into proper morning as I got discharged from the hospital and had Brian drive me home. The second I saw the house, I realized Brian was right. Just thinking about this home with its happy memories was killing me, as Brian said. The paintings at my drawing studio would be packed and sent later together with Brian's. I just left the unfinished ones where they were. I thought about the confused and cautious lines on my current canvas. I wouldn't made never seeing that work again. I packed up the best of my supplies and some clothes. I realized I was leaving the house as though I were guilty of something, so I pulled out my phone and called Arthur. Of course he didn't answer. I saw on my newsfeed that word had already broken about Arthur and Selena's engagement, describing them as a perfect match. Feeling even colder inside, I sent a text. Let's break up now. I looked around my Arthur's bedroom to make sure I hadn't left anything important behind. The sense of loss was almost overwhelming, but I knew this was the right thing to do. The alternative was unacceptable. My phone rang. It was Arthur. It was the fastest he'd ever called me back after a missed call. Arthur POV. I woke up in my office lounge, my neck stuck to the leather and my whole body cold. My mouth tasted like stale champagne, and way too much small talk. A gentle knock on my office door got me sitting up on the couch. Come, I said. My assistant, a solid beta named Jose, entered my office and smiled. Congratulations, sir. The news is buzzing about your engagement to Selena Wilford. You're being called the perfect couple. I smiled and thanked him, all the while silently cursing Selena for deciding on her own to tell the world about us. She'd kept the news of our betrothal to herself for years, but she couldn't have waited a couple days, so I could break the news to Iris? "I'll bring you some coffee," Jose said before turning to walk out. I was going to tell him to bring a pot when he suddenly came back, holding my personal phone. "Sir, I rejected Iris's call earlier like usual, but I think you need to take a look at this." I always had Jose filter my personal calls when I was working. If he thought it was important, it must be. I started to feel a little uneasy. What had happened with Iris? I grabbed the phone from him, and my heart sank as I saw the message from Iris. "Let's break up now." What the hell? I growled, hackles raising. Was this some sort of joke? Break up? I quickly called her back, but the phone went to voicemail. What was Iris thinking? What was she doing? I ended up grabbing a cup of coffee from Jose's hand as I rushed out of the office. "Get my car." I called back to him. I made it outside and waited for the car to be pulled around. Standing there, I dialed Iris again, and again ended up with voicemail. "Iris," I said into the phone. "Call me back immediately. I'm on my way home now." The car arrived, and I got behind the wheel with a low growl. I couldn't drive in a panic. It was bad enough I was being seen in a formal shirt and tuxedo pants in public in the morning. I looked like I was taking a walk of shame. No, I told myself, there was no way Iris really wanted to break up. I wasn't going to marry her, true, but I was still rich and powerful, and she needed someone to help with that baby she was insisting on having. No, she would be there at home waiting for me, and when I got there we would talk. I would make her see reason, offer her more money, and everything would be fine. I said it aloud in the car. Everything will be fine. I'll explain, and it will all be fine. Money. I knew that was the key. Iris had many wonderful qualities, and she was by some cosmic joke my fated mate. But I knew money was her top priority. We'd met at a restaurant when she'd come to my table and asked if I wanted something to drink to get lunch started. I'd looked up and known, and she'd done pretty much the same. Fortunately, I'd been dining alone. In those early days when we were getting to know each other, I'd come to the restaurant often enough to become a regular, often getting kidded by other servers about my relationship with Iris, who had told me she was an art student. About 2 weeks in, I'd been sitting at my usual table waiting for her, when I heard her talking in the passage between the kitchen and the dining area. She hadn't known I was there yet, and they were all congratulating her on landing such a catch. Many of them had artistic careers, mostly actors, and they were talking about how I could support her. To my discomfort, she'd agreed, laughing about how I would give her a secure future, so she wouldn't have to starve for her art. The servers had all laughed until the manager came over and told them to stop congregating in the passage and get back to work. Iris had emerged then, tray in hand, and shot me a casual smile of greeting when she saw me sitting there. I knew my place in her life then, and though it was almost as disappointing as when I'd realized my mate was human, I just left without saying anything. At home, however, I'd realized her desires to be secure financially were reasonable. Relationships could be transactional. It was just my reaction that was excessive. I even realized I should have been relieved, because Iris wouldn't mind that I was marrying for political reasons as long as I kept her bills paid. Knowing money controlled Iris meant I only needed to give her enough to keep her. I didn't think about children, particularly that she would have a human fetus, but that just meant more money. All would be well, I told myself, and my shoulders relaxed as I pulled into the driveway of our house. But the moment I opened the door from the garage into the foyer, I knew something was wrong. To begin with, the house was empty with no other heartbeat but my own. Next, there was a staleness to the place, as though it had been deserted. I walked into the living room where something tiny on the coffee table caught my eye. I picked it up and saw it was a SIM card. Had Iris left this? Had she done it so I couldn't trace her location? Had she really actually left me? My phone rang, and I reached for it eagerly, but it was only Selena. Yes, I asked her. Why aren't you here? Where? I was looking around to see if anything were missing. I decided to check upstairs. At Tiffany's, of course. We're supposed to be choosing the engagement ring, remember? What did you say to Iris? I demanded. What? She's gone. You did this. What did you say to her? Well, didn't have to say much. I just gave her some money and told her to end the pregnancy and never come back. She seemed happy to go. I stood halfway up the stairs. There was a watercolor hanging on the wall, a school project of Iris's. Happy? I repeated. Yes. She jumped at the money, actually. We signed a contract. And we don't have to worry about her bothering us again. The watercolor blurred, but it wasn't tears that filled my eyes, only fury. That gold digger had taken the fastest route out of our relationship despite my wealth, despite my care of her. Had she even hesitated before agreeing to leave? Had she ever really cared about me at all? Let alone love me, the way she kept insisting? Well, I wasn't going to get any answers out of the damn watercolor. I'll be at Tiffany's soon, I told Selena and ended the call. Then I dialed a new number. Yes, sir? Jose asked. Iris has left. I need you to find her. I don't care how much it costs.